It's working? Great. Good morning. Thank you very much, Jerry, for letting me be here, and thanks everyone for making the time this morning. My name is Laurie Dowling. I'm the Executive Director of the National Utilities Diversity Council. We conduct research and share best practices to advance diversity in the utilities and communications industries. For us, that's supplier diversity, workforce diversity, language access, customer service, and governance diversity. And we do a lot of collaboration, as Jerry is indicating, with the U.S. Department of Energy and other departments, specifically right now to try to get the word out about the Infrastructure Act funding, which is called the BIL, which is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is its new name, as well as some of the other funding that's out there. And I think that's what we're going to talk about this morning. So thanks for letting me be part of this.
Thank you, Lori. So I'm going to turn it over to Enid, a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you've done, and especially in the energy funding and sustainability space.
Sure. Well, if you saw the movie, was it Moneyball or one of the, where they said, "Show me the money." Okay, that's why I'm here. I'm going to show you the money. We are in a moment in time that has never happened in my life, and I doubt will happen again, and we either use it or lose it. So I am happy to talk about all of the funding, state, federal, local, that's available. I'm a grant writer currently, and doing a lot of work with various organizations on the the charging and fueling infrastructure grants, which hopefully a lot of your cities are applying for. I know we're talking to a lot of them. And to give you a little bit about my background, I started out, I've had several careers, but I started out with Southern California Edison, and many, many years ago with Mr. Silva here, and we became colleagues and friends. And the end of that career, I was there 18 years, I got involved in electric transportation and fell in love with it. And my first interview for a job in electric transportation, my future boss said, "So what qualifies you to do electric transportation?" She knew I had a lot of government relations background. And I said, "Well, I rode the New York subways for the first 20 years of my life." And she said, "You're hired." So, so that's how I got involved, and it's just been a great ride ever since. So, and then in let's see, when did I start my business? I started business in 1999 to install charging stations, and one of my very first grants was in San Bernardino, and here I was knocking on doors, going to malls, going to the outlet malls, everywhere, and everybody looked at me like I had two heads and said, "I don't see any electric cars out here. Why would we put in a charging station?" And I said, "Because it's free?" And they said, "No, that's not good enough." So we've come a long way. I came into the lot this morning. There's Tesla chargers over there. There's ChargePoint chargers over there. It's very exciting to feel that we've actually crested the mountain that we were climbing. So now I'm doing consulting. I've been working, Karen will fill you in on the projects we're working on together, which address a lot of the things that were said about workforce development and clean energy and training the new generation of workers. So thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to have reconnected with my old friend Jerry.
Thank you, Enid. So before I start with you, Karen, I want to get sort of a survey, because Karen's part of the presentation is going to be really important. How many actually and I know some of you that actually have EVs. How many? Can you raise your hand? How many have electric vehicles? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have several. And how many of you are considering it? Okay, there's quite a bit there. Okay, and how many of you? What you don't realize, we have our grid generation guru right here, Terry Maddox, who's going to talk a lot about where that opportunity is going to be. But a lot of people may not know this. The airport of San Bernardino is actually considering 130 plus EV chargers. So I want to make that point, because the infrastructure is being built, and we're going to get a little bit that, and we're going to talk now with Karen. It's a good lead in for what you're doing and sort of the opportunities and some of the grant funding. So please, introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Karen Suarez. I'm the director of a collective impact initiative called Uplift San Bernardino. Our mission is to build a generation of successful adults who are committed to growing roots in our great city. And while I was born in Los Angeles, I was raised in the Inland Empire, and I am a proud graduate of Cal State San Bernardino. I'm first generation daughter of immigrants. And so I love this community. And through Collective Impact, we're able to support with our anchor partners, with our grassroots partners, with our families, with our residents, but most importantly, with our students. Create strategies for neighborhood development to increase homeownership, to support our small businesses so that they can grow here, and to make sure that our students have pathways to careers, specifically in this sector. The way that for us, our gateway, I guess, into energy is we partnered up with Enid and her company, Green Paradigm Consulting, and we applied for a California Air Resource Board grant. All of us here in San Bernardino have experienced watching, solar installation and watching EVs come online. But the thing that was really striking to me was during COVID. For those weeks that we were on lockdown, I've never seen the sky so unbelievably blue. It was so beautiful. And I really feel that we need to make a strong commitment for a community like ours. We're an AB 617 community. Our air quality is really poor. And by electrifying the thing which is commuting and lots of individual car use, we can make a drastic difference in the lives of our youth and in our families simply by helping them understand how we transition to a cleaner economy and clean energy. We've developed a workforce development program, and we started with middle school students. So we went to our local middle schools that have a STEM lab, and they have been co-designing curriculum with us, specifically on electric vehicle charging stations. And it has been a wonderful way for us to expose our youth, not just to EVs, but also to electrification, to electrical engineering, to careers as electricians, and so on and so forth. We really see partnering up with our energy partners as well as with our local airport as a huge opportunity to teach and to have demonstrate how together we can collaborate to create clean air in this city, which we all know will also have a tremendous amount of wonderful positive health outcomes in the form of less asthma and other health issues that our families face because of the air pollution that we experience on a daily basis.
Thank you, Karen. So you have the brain trust here of not only the grant funding and some of the programs, but you also have the recipient of some of those programs and how it's being utilized. So I'm going to go to Lori with this because I want you to elaborate a little bit more about your organization and some of the wonderful things that you're doing and where some of those big pots of money and funds are buried, especially on the educational side. I don't think people realize there's money there. There's money on the water side as well. People don't know that money's there. And I saw Maria earlier, so I know she's here to be all ears.
Sure.
So.
Thank you, Jerry. Actually, I have a couple of questions for the audience. First of all, please raise your hand if you are, if your city or your company is in any way at this point contemplating participating in any of the grant funding opportunities through the Infrastructure Act. Just raise your hand. Great. And raise your hand now, please, if you are associated in any way with a minority-serving institution in the Inland Empire. Dude, you're not raising your hand. Frank, raise your hand. Dude, I'm setting you up here. The reason I'm asking this is because, I mentioned the Infrastructure Act. The other thing is, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the federal government, if I could, because I think what we're going to see, and you're right, Enid, I think this is sort of a once-in-a-generation thing. People keep saying that, but I spent a day with a utility company that shall remain nameless in Washington last week, and all of the presidents of the operating companies looking at all of the funding that they were going to apply for, and it's in the billions that they're applying for alone. This is about $2 trillion. It's coming from primarily from the two acts, the BIL and the IRA. God forbid we shouldn't have acronyms. And it's 10 agencies that are letting this funding primarily. There are a few others, but the bulk of it is coming from 10 agencies. And what's interesting about it is there is opportunities for corporations, utility companies, and others to apply, but there is a tremendous, the bulk of the money really is going to come and flow through cities and counties and states. And I list them all because in theory it's all flowing through states, but not 100%. And there are 382 programs at this point that are available, that are doing grants. And so if you're looking at one, you're not looking at everything. Sadly, there's not, it's a little bit hard to find it all, you know, all of the funding opportunities, because there's the aggregation is not as efficient as it could be, I think, mostly because they're still making these programs up, and the Federal Register still is really one of the few places to find everything. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I don't sit and look at the Federal Register in my life. You know, oh, look, I know what I'll do today. I'll look at the Federal Register. That'll be really fun, because it's not very user-friendly. But just to say that, as Jerry mentioned, there are a tremendous number of different kinds of opportunities from, so let's just talk, going for what your three elected officials talked about already this morning. There's wildfire mitigation money. There's straight up infrastructure money, whether it's grid resiliency or electric charging, hydrogen, boatloads of green hydrogen opportunities. You know, the state of California is up for is one of many states that is up for a hydrogen hub. There is specific money available for grant programs for education, as Frank mentioned, but there's also, and you know, a lot of that is running through the Department of Energy, but not alone. The Office of Science in the Department of Energy, I was at a presentation that they did a few weeks ago, and they're desperately interested in finding current students, graduate students, and professors from Hispanic serving and other minority serving institutions. For professors, they have externships at the national labs. There's a tremendous amount of resources available. And I think, you know, one of the fabulous things for San Bernardino area, the Inland Empire area, is the aspect of this that is governed through Justice 40. And I don't know how much y'all have thought about this. When we talked about this last year, it was all sort of new, and they hadn't really figured out how they were going to make it operational. At this point, with the exception of a few programs that rolled out in the summer of last year, for every single one of these IAJA programs and IRA programs, Justice 40 counts for 20% of the grant score. So that means that, especially in a situation where companies are applying for, or basically competing for programs, whether it's hydrogen hub or a grid resiliency project or an electric vehicle charging station, the technology is not really different among the companies, right? You know, like the hydrogen hub, hydrogen technology is hydrogen technology, and you're not going to see a lot of differentiation between the hydrogen hub in California and the hydrogen hub proposal in Texas. They're really the same technology. So what you're going to be competing on to some extent is the other stuff, especially the Justice 40 criteria, which is evinced through a community benefits plan. And so if I were going to compete with somebody, let's pretend that Karen and I were going to compete with something, and we're both women, we're both wearing glasses, we've got some similarities. We both have dark shoes. We both have on a kind of a cheerful jacket. We've got some similarities, right? What are the things that bring us apart? I'm not going to throw 20% of my possible advantage away. I'm going to keep my 20% in the hope that your 20% is not going to be as strong. And so the reason that I'm bringing this up is that that 20%, the Justice 40 20% that is events through the community benefits plan, is things like collaboration with minority serving institutions, working with diverse suppliers, working with workforce development programs in disadvantaged communities. That is going to be one of the key determiners for a lot of success for a lot of these programs. And what that means is that if you're in a community that has a large Latino population, a large African American population, a lot of diverse businesses that can be supportive around any aspect of the needs of a utility company or a city or others, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to be the flavor of the month for a lot of the people that cities, states, and companies that are applying, and especially for minority serving institutions in those regions and cities, because that is a huge focus of the current administration. It was a big focus with Jerry of the last administration.
Right, and I'd like to add to that. A lot of times people miss the component of, is it buildable based on that engagement and not getting, derailed. And I've done major projects. I mean, for those of you who've gone out to Vegas and seen that whole solar one in Nevada, people don't realize it's the engagement, it's the support, it's making sure that you have a lot of opportunity to discuss what the issues are from whatever perspective they're coming from in terms of the stakeholders. So what I'd like to do is do that a lead-in for Enid. Enid, you've done, in the last 2 years, an enormous amount of grants, and I'll let you talk about what that number is. But there are also keywords that are part of your grant funding, and it also, what you've heard today. Please elaborate on what Lori has said and on that component.
Yeah. With everything that Lori has said. And I'll bring it down to the practical level of writing the proposals. So I'm currently in the thick of writing probably 6 proposals for the charging and fueling infrastructure grants. Hopefully one of them will be for San Bernardino. We don't know yet. But I agree totally that it's telling the story of a community like San Bernardino, like Inland Empire, and that has been so underfunded, honestly, and not received their due. And I totally relate to what Frank said about going after the money for the colleges. When I started writing the first grant for Making Hope Happen Foundation, I looked at the studies of charging sites in San Bernardino County and compared to the rest of California. And there's a new term out there now called EV desert. This is an EV desert. Even though you see a lot charging station more than 20 years ago, there's still very few. And as we know, people will not buy EVs unless they see charging stations. And I manage a program for the South Coast Air Quality Management District that I want to mention, because it's an amazing program and the uptake rate is really sad in this area. And that is, we give $9,500 and it's soon to go up to $11,500 for individuals to basically turn in, dismantle an old pre-2008 car, which is probably not running that great anyway, and get a new or used hybrid or electric or hydrogen vehicle. Now, that is the best thing since sliced bread. We have a long waiting list, but not from San Bernardino. And one of the things that Karen and I are committed to is we did a baseline of how many cars there are now, and I was able to do a few years of history, and then we're going to see if we can move the needle. So we're doing very pragmatic work, boots on the ground work, meeting with families. I've met with the school district families, met with the small business resource group, met with adult education. We're trying to get the word out there. Please, please use those resources that are available to you. So then turning to some of the grants, Jerry's right. Fortunately, he forced me to add them all up, which I had never done. So now I'm really impressed. I've gotten $30 million in funding in 2 years. And it's grunt work, but it's also having a passion for telling the story. And I believe that this area, and let me give you some insider information. In talking to the Joint Office of DOE and DOT, a colleague of mine is the coordinator of electric transportation in Oregon. So she happened to have dinner and breakfast. They were in town in Portland, and they met. And she said, this deadline's impossible. You're asking, cities all over the country to write applications, and nobody understands the guidelines. The RFP is poorly written. And they said, we're not moving the deadline, which is May 30th, by the way. And we're going to get that money out there. We have to get that money out there. So we will take the best proposals we get, but we'll be, quote unquote, grading on a curve. So part of why I'm saying it's so important to do it now is by next year, everybody's going to be ready. And this is 5-year funding, and they're doing year 1 and year 2 this year. So it's $700 million. One of the things when Karen and I started looking at the opportunities, we're surrounded by, 3 freeways, just San Bernardino. If you take the broader area with Highland and everything, it's probably 5 freeways. That's a focus, that's emissions issues. We have the demographics, we have success in getting money, we have the programs, we have the community. One of the reasons I chose to do my quote-unquote semi-retirement work in this area is that my first career was with United Way doing community organizing. What has been done in this community in terms of the grassroots organizations kind of rising up to help themselves is amazing. And I was inspired by that. And I said, I'm coming full circle. I'm doing my electrification work that I love. I'm doing something healthy for the community. And I'm serving a community that wants to be helped. So I'm happy to answer questions, but it was something else you wanted me to talk about? Okay.
You did hit the key points, and and again, I want to open it up to the audience for a couple questions before we conclude this panel. But I want Karen.
Can I just add
Go ahead.
one
Sure.
more thing? Sorry. I just wanted to share a couple of examples of some of the things we're doing. So I just found out yesterday that we were selected to be the grant writer for the Cowlitz tribe, Indian tribe in Washington, state of Washington. They're organizing 5 tribes to apply along the 5 corridor. Now, if that's not a winning application, I don't know what is. So, and then we're working with a lot of other communities, both in Northern California, Southern California, partnering with a group called the Energy Coalition, with Contra Costa County. There's just a number of things going on. But those are the kinds of things we can put together that are just going to benefit the whole community, and then tied in where we already have the workforce development piece of it through other program that we started. We're ready to expand that tremendously. We want to work with the college. We've already started those conversations. And we just, I just think I get very excited about it because I just think we have a great opportunity to do what I've been talking about for 20 years. Thanks.
Thanks, Enid. So Karen, I had the opportunity to attend the workshop that involved the students. And I've been doing a lot of stuff on the mentoring side with a lot of organizations, including SPD Cares with Mike and what he's doing here. Talk a little bit about what that day was like for those students, and before we open it up to Q&A, of what that money meant that you received for the grant.
Yeah, these dollars have, they've just made a significant impact off the bat. One, we were able to increase our capacity as an organization, so we were able to hire another person who has incredible workforce development talents, who grew up in this city, who has a big heart for San Bernardino and for the development of workers. So we partnered up with one of our housing authority and one of their properties here in San Bernardino. It's called Arrowhead Grove. And it is also a LEED certified facility. They actually have charging stations on site. It's an affordable housing development with chargers, and they are being used. And so we invited our students to join us on a Saturday for a half day. And we asked them to basically just like dive in and learning about electric vehicle charging stations. And Enid gave a history. We talked about how it's connected to, our utility system. We had someone who worked for an electric vehicle company who happened to be on the infrastructure side, who also grew up in San Bernardino. So now they're seeing someone who looks like them share their personal story of how they got into the sector. And then we invited them to do an on-site walkthrough and an actual assessment. We borrowed LA County's EV assessment site tool, and we asked the students to team up and then basically let us know, based on the size of the transformer in the parking lot, how many electric vehicle charging stations they could get into that parking lot. And mind you, I had 5 middle school students and I had 15 high school students, and they were incredibly engaged. Enid was gracious enough to bring her Tesla and let us plug it in and unplug it and plug it in and unplug it. And so it was watching the students, though. We cannot underestimate this generation. They are far more advanced in the use of technology, in their understanding and comprehension of really technical issues. And so I have middle school students who are on a pathway to go to their sister or their feeder high school that has an engineering project lead the way program. I had students from an entrepreneurship high school who were like so fascinated by all of this that they were going to write a business plan with their teacher on campus because they wanted to get started now while applying to colleges to become an electrical engineer. And I had some young women who were like, I had no idea that this could even possibly be an option. And when we start talking to them about the great paying careers and how they could, buy homes in San Bernardino, they could start a business in San Bernardino, you just open up to, the possibilities become just really endless and wonderful for these students. And that was our first pilot cohort. Since then, we're being asked to replicate this again, to go to other sites. We are going to be hiring 10 trainees, essentially. 5 of them will be doing outreach, and I think I don't know if it was. I think maybe you, Frank, you mentioned that I think it was maybe Supervisor Joe Baca Jr. mentioning that we're not sure. Is your electrical panel large enough to be able to handle a charging load? Well, our students are going to learn how to do that, and then we're hoping that your organizations are able to hire them because now they have some experience with with professionals and folks who have the certifications to train them to do those things. And then the other 5 students are going to do in addition, they'll do community outreach, and the other ones will do actual on-site reviews if a multifamily facility or if a single-family homeowner it has an appropriate sized panel. We are really excited. We want to see this program grow, not just in San Bernardino City Unified, but across our Inland Empire region. We are partnering up with San Bernardino Valley College, who has an EV technician program. And just from this seed funding, really, that we got, we've been able to attract additional funders. Private philanthropy is considering playing a role on the workforce development side. So it's not just public and private, or public dollars can really serve as catalyzers for other private funding to start to come. We also have individual donors from our regional community foundation who have expressed interest in supporting scholarships to get these students on a pathway into this sector. So we are incredibly excited. I want to thank Mike publicly again for a lot. We took Omnitran bus with our students and had them come to the airport. They had never ridden public transportation, so we taught them how to do that. They downloaded the app. So we're doing, field trips in our own backyard. One of the wonderful things I think about Justice 40s too is that this gives us an opportunity to be creative in our own backyards. And really, I encourage everyone to lean into the expertise of the lived experience of our local community. We know the transportation challenges that we have. We know that there's a lot of opportunities out there, and it's our responsibility to help folks connect the dots. And so we're incredibly grateful for you, Enid, and our other partner, Next Education, that helped us develop this. Really, I have no a professional background in energy, but I think it's absolutely possible for anyone who has an interest, and I'm especially excited to see that young man over there. I'm excited to see you here because, anyone can learn on how to be a part of this movement. And I do think that it's something we need to lean in and to go after so we can accelerate progress and obviously a better future for our youth. Oh, yeah. So we asked our students to what do they think about the curriculum? Like, how can we make it better? And so their recommendation was that we create a virtual reality version of an actual installation so that they don't have to be on site, and obviously a much safer, controlled environment. And so we have requested for additional capacity dollars from the California Air Resource Board to support us in creating a VR opportunity for training.
Thank you, Karen. So one thing I'd like to add, when I did go to that visit, you could see the upgraded transformer that had to take place to accommodate all of that new load. So I do want to stress that. So that was an infrastructure challenge that I saw as they were pointing that out during that presentation. So one thing I'd like to add, I do sit on the U.S. Hydrogen Alliance board, and we're dealing with planning, and we haven't discussed a whole lot of that part of it. But one of the things that I've been pursuing very aggressively, actually, over the last 4 or 5 months now, that I've seen an opportunity based on just my background working with communities and municipalities and county government, is I've tried to redefine smart cities. And so I've been working a lot on that, and there's a reason why. And there's certain cities that have a unique mix that can take advantage of not only hydrogen, but all the other energy components. And with that, smart city has always in the past been defined as technology-driven, not energy-driven or capital-driven. And you're going to hear later from Kelly on sustainability programs. There's usually a component missing on an overall strategy. And I found this to be at not only Edison, but I found at DOE. Everybody seems to work in individual silos, okay? And there's no holistic approach to a strategy. So because of that, not one project manager talks to the other project manager, so there's missed opportunities. And I've held back some of the recipe that I'm working on because there is a surprise. And so when I went back for the mayor's conference in January, I also met with my DO colleagues, and I started just throwing down, there's all this money and all these opportunities. The problem is, I think there's a missed opportunity, people just understanding what's available. And that's just me. Whether it's hydrogen, grid resiliency, battery storage, I could go down the entire list. I mean, you've got some technology out here that's going to be discussed, not only in the battery storage side from Grid Story, you also have it from Garth Schultz on the REG technologies of how they can utilize it for emergency service, their technology. Where I'm going with this is I'm looking at the funding for both you, Lori, and you, Enid. There is redefining smart cities. There's municipal. I think there's missed opportunity in just not only the EV component, there's also the grid resiliency component for Native Americans. Not only in the hydrogen side, but there's also the discussion on for the ports as well as they try to do their conversion. What can you share, at least what you've been exposed? And I'll start with Lori.
Okay, the folks from the northern Midwest were talking about how they're pretty worried about electric vehicle charging in, say, the wilds of Minnesota, when it gets down to negative 30 degrees, not on a surprising day. And so for them, they're looking at the mix with regards to, how do we meet our clean fuel mandate and our clean emissions mandates? And hydrogen is a big part of that for those states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, et cetera. And so I think that they are looking at the mix. The part that I just remember from your comments last year, Jerry, is the measure twice, dig once concept. In other words, if we're doing broadband, if we're doing all of this conversion at once, is there a way to inconvenience the community only one time? And I don't want us to forget that. And that's the part I do worry about the regulatory utility commissioners not necessarily having enough information to nudge on. But the other piece of this, money, in addition to the energy side, directly coming from the Department of Energy, there are energy-related projects that are going to come from a lot of other departments, whether it is agriculture, whether it is homeland security. So there's a tremendous amount of money for cybersecurity on the grid, right? That's one of the biggest things we're worried about nationally. There's a lot of money for wildfire mitigation, both and other disaster-related mitigation, flood. God, now we have to think about floods in California. Go figure. And so that's going to roll out through the tribes, and it's going to roll out to states and cities, and ultimately, I think, to utility companies in some ways. So they're like these incredibly huge pots of money, and it's like $500 million, it's $900 million. I mean, this is like not the money that you find in your sofa cushions. I was looking at it last night, 382 programs so far announced. Now, not every one of them has funding opportunities attached to it. They are across like all 10 of those agencies that I mentioned, from agriculture to commerce has some of them. I mean, it's all over the place. And that money, I think, it's some of it is for stuff that we have needed to do for so long as communities and as a nation, that it's like free money. It really is, free resources. So I think that the just going back, the energy mix, I don't know that you're right. I'm not sure that cities are thinking about the energy mix very well. I think that it's, the shiny stuff is so easy,
Well, and let me add to that.
And of course the water side.
Well, no,
which we
exactly.
can't
And
forget.
I think people often forget, Maria Kenny's in the audience. Maria's a big water person that does a lot with the water agencies, and we were trying to get one of the MWD chairman out here, and unfortunately we couldn't. But what I'd like to elaborate, people often don't think about water as being an energy source, and often it's overlooked, yet it's a huge resource, right? And in some areas it's actually really overlooked because of just the necessity of it. But you have not only water, you have the wind, you have the solar. I mean, I have solar. I know people out here that have solar on their roofs, and with that, people don't realize, I mean, I'm inundated with all kinds of technologies to review just because my background in the energy sector as well as DOE. And so, I'm looking at the next technology of solar. It's in my garage. And you sit there and you go, that's pretty cool. I'm waiting for UL to approve it. But the smart cities component is because they see this program rolling out from a utility or from an agency, we're just going to go install it because it's available, not realizing they should be looking at it holistically. What are the impacts and where can we maximize opportunity? I mean, I can elaborate a lot more because certain cities can actually adopt it a lot quicker and a lot faster. And I've actually been talking to Kelly about this, and especially in her neck of the woods in Chicago. So with that, I'm looking for you guys to say, hey, this is what we're seeing in terms of the municipal and the agencies that are being rolled out, because I think people often don't realize when these budgets get approved by the state, or they get approved by the county, or they get approved by the cities, usually they have just an end, they have a start time when it gets approved, and they have an end time, but they really don't look at how that fits in with their overall strategy. So,
Yeah, I could comment on that. I'm also a former mayor of the city of Sierra Madre, and so I've worked with on city council of a very small government that didn't have bandwidth to do anything. And I think while I was there, I finally got them to get a CNG station and get some CNG vehicles for their fleet. I'm very worried about the whole infrastructure and resilience and energy mix. And I feel, you know, and I'm a former loyal Edison employee, but I feel like the utilities are not able to respond quickly enough. And I have been in conferences where the utilities have said, okay, well, we're going to look at our grid structure, we're going to figure out which circuits we have capacity on, and we'll tell people to put the chargers there. And I said, guys, that ain't happening. This is not the way to do it. And so what's happening, what I'm seeing instead, and then of course we have the whole issue of hardening the grid, very concerned about grid security. I was the one who at Edison had to go to the customer in the middle of the night and tell them, and this is before cell phones, and tell them that the power was going to go to the mayor and tell them the power was out. They didn't appreciate that call at 2 a.m. in the morning. But in any case, that was, you know, we had a lot of, and I know in this area in particular, I am told by the community that there are issues with reliability. So if you lose your charger and you can't charge your car, you're dead in the water, literally, you know. So on the other hand, if you can charge your car, you could be given electricity back to the grid. So there's a tremendous opportunity because our cars are parked 90% of the time. We're not in them driving. So, so there's a huge opportunity there. But what I see happening, first of all, I think my experience both as a city official and as a utility person, as an entrepreneur, is you find a champion. You find a city or county who gets it, who's willing to do it, who's willing to show the world what they're doing. And it turns out that the person who was our city manager, who I helped hire, is now the city manager of Rancho Cucamonga. And the best compliment I've ever been paid is when I had lunch with him a year or so ago, and I said, I can't believe all the wonderful green things you're doing in Rancho. And he said, well, it's all because of you. You wouldn't let me off the hook. You know, I had to go green. So to me, that's a huge compliment. But what I do see is at a conference I was at, which no utilities were at, which was, you know, very interesting, all private sector, and the private sector is stepping up and saying these charging stations under the BIL are going to be all over rural areas where there is no power right now. And we're going to develop technologies that are grid independent. And I think that is a wake-up call, honestly, to the utilities. I think it's great in some ways because it does build resilience and it does build options, and nobody wants a, you know, huge power line coming through their community, so we have the whole NIMBY syndrome going on. But I think that's where you're going to find the solutions, is in these entrepreneurs who are getting a lot of money from venture capital and creating these grid-independent systems. And then I think, again, the utilities have to step it up. And I know Southern California Edison is a great example because they are spending probably $1 billion on electrification. And I don't even know all the money going into resiliency. But that's probably where the solution, and find those champions. Find those mayors and city managers who are willing to step up and say, I'm going to take the risk, because it is a risk. And we all know that new technology doesn't always work. And having started with EVs in 1993, I definitely know that. So, but they have to take the risk, and some will and some won't, and you got to find the ones who will.
Thank you, Enid. So what I'd like to do is take this opportunity to open it up to the audience, because I know there's a few questions that have got to be out there. So, yes.
The chips have 59 billion in it. And a fraction of that would transform any community. And the national priority is to push onshoring of foreign chips manufacturer suppliers. Right now, just us, we're working with 500 supplier company coming from Taiwan. Originally, they were saying, well, we got to be in Phoenix because this is where the epicenter is. But what we found, the last time I checked, that anybody that's going to have to go to Phoenix, or the material or the labor, has to pass through California. So there's no if, and, but about it. Yeah, so we created a process called the Goods Movement Corridor for them. So we are doing we're interested in doing a project in San Bernardino because that's part of the Goods Movement Corridor. We are currently working, we were in touch with the international airport, and right now we're writing a grant. And part of that is including California cities, but one of the prescription that they want us to come in and do is to find subserved community, underserved community. And we see that in this region. They also want us to look into the tribals. They always also want us to look into an intersection of technology like what we're talking about it today. So you mentioned technology has risk. We understand that. But we also understand the fact that when you have 500 companies that wants to come to the US, there's really not much risk of a community getting a transformation. So we see one of the reasons for this is the labor pool is very rich here. We work with ASU, Arizona State University, so they follow the trail. They literally purchased a building downtown LA to help facilitate the process. But the key issue is the local community network. We also mandated to do workforce development, not just the engineer and the scientists. It's really what we call apprenticeship. Because all these companies, when they come over, they are not going to bring all their workforce. They need to train local. And there's tremendous amount of money involved. There's tremendous money in the transportation also. So leveraging what California already have, like iBank and TIFIA and so on, and all the technology. So yesterday we've been in a conference that keep talking about the hydrogen hub and so on. But the key issue is these specific money will go to what we call a specific locale. It's going to a city, a county, and so that it can spur the development. We are currently looking at a site that is going to build 1.5 million square foot. So we basically are, right now, we're looking at least 3 different cities in California, and we're going to invest in it, and we're going to invest in the community. This is a long-term investment for us. So what we're saying is there's more money out there. I never seen anything like this year.
Well, and it's also the federal mandate to use it in the way that we want it to be used.
Yeah.
First time ever, the federal government saying, if you want to get paid, you have to do these things.
This is how we describe it, as a design economy. So the federal government is designing the economy, and the economy has to have intersecting ecosystem-led economic development. And there is plenty of ecosystem here. So what I'm encouraging is I've heard all these technologies, great, California is great at this, but we need to also bring in an existing demand, because ultimately the demand is going to drive the industry. And it's here already. The CHIPS Act is ready to go. So I'd like to sit down and figure out how we can intersect with all of you.
Well, you have free Hispanic services. You can't throw a rock and get a discount without any.
We love it. We love the. Yeah, we love it.
I mean, I could speak for 2 hours on exactly what you're talking about. And Well, Frank, why don't you comment a little bit what John?
Yeah, we'll connect up.
Okay. So go ahead, Frank. I know you shared a little bit about some of the challenges. You want to go ahead and comment on John's statement?
Well, you know, again, higher education is thought of just educating people, but it's beyond that. We're actually taking the lead. I didn't have a chance to talk about Justice 40, but Justice 40 is a mandate from President Biden, like I said, that is telling each of the federal agencies that they have to spend at least 40% of their investments. Can you imagine 40% of billions of dollars coming to areas in higher education? But we can partner with cities, with the counties, with the airport. I take a special interest because I had an impact on what Mike is doing now 20 years ago. So we can really leverage that. So don't think of just higher education as education. We are doing beyond that, and we can partner. Some companies are not willing to come to this area if we don't have an educated population. We lost some opportunities about 20 years ago, but now we're ready to do that. And that's why I always encourage higher education, not only for San Bernardino Community College District is a district that has vision. We are really out there. I mean, I was the only one that was invited to be part of this panel in the United States for the Department of Energy. And Jerry knows those people. So we are in the process of doing some things. And, you know, I've met with presidents. I want you to know, it doesn't impress me to meet with presidents or vice presidents. What resources are going to bring into our community? And we need to learn to ask those questions, because if you take the picture with the president or the vice president, that's good. But are there any resources coming back? Like, you know, maybe we can partner with you. We can train some of those students that would help you with that. So it's there. And again, it's a great opportunity, and I'm working. As soon as I leave here, I'm going to go talk. They did an evaluation in this, and we have a headquarters in Washington, D.C., the Hispanic Surgeons Colleges and Universities. They've done a study. We're going to submit that to the President of the United States, and we're going to say, you neglected this community and that community, and now working even with the airport. So I'm going to share a lot of things, and I'm not going to charge you this time, but I will charge you that because it cost me money to go to Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to add that is something Enid said about the resiliency component, and Terry, this is just something I wanted to share with you because it came out of my I got invited by the DOE to attend this George Washington Smart Cities Conference. And while I was there, you realize, oh my God, they're actually looking at this technology, which is something that I couldn't comprehend. But they were actually looking at taking the EVs that are charged, and while they're working, utilizing that energy during the off-peak hours, and so draining the battery of that EV so it can be recharged as part of distributed energy. And that was a whole new concept for me, not because I didn't think it could be done. It's like, well, then why are we getting an EV? Was my immediate thought. You know, if your goal is to charge it and then just pull the energy off the vehicle back onto the grid. These are the challenges that are happening, maybe not here, but that was happening on the East Coast. Just so you know, those are the conversations that were taking place. So when we think, you know, we got aging infrastructure, you got to look at the East Coast and think, man, they got really aging infrastructure in some areas that they're having to look at this technology. And that was a full discussion with some of the DOE folks, which I thought to be interesting. So with that, I'd like to open it up to another question. Okay, Amber?
Thank you, Amber. My name is Kusum, and I'm a minority-owned woman business in manufacturing in the energy sector. And my question is for Lori. Lori, I have been in business now for over 30 years. And this is the first time I'm hearing about the National Utilities Diversity Council. So it just goes to show, you always learn something new every day. So my question is how does one connect with the Diversity Council? And part two of that question is, for an entrepreneur, what are some of the benefits? And can you share a recent success story? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for asking all of that. I really appreciate it. So the NUDC is a little bit more like a think tank than it is like a traditional association for connecting entrepreneurs. So if you imagine WeBank or the Southern California Minority Supplier Development Council, we collaborate with those folks a lot, but we don't do what they do. So what we primarily do is to do a couple things. One, we create resources that are free around aspects of a variety of types of diversity that we think either utilities or communications companies need to be thinking about, diverse suppliers need to be thinking about, or regulators need to be thinking about. And we spend a lot of time educating regulators so they can ask the right questions of utilities and understand the answers that they're given around a lot of aspects of diversity, including supplier diversity and workforce diversity. So we do a lot of free webinars and stuff like that. We just did one a few weeks ago in collaboration with the American Indian Chamber of Commerce on how to advance supplier diversity spend with Native American-owned business enterprises, for example. A few months ago, we did one on creative access to capital for small businesses. So it really sort of depends on what we're doing at the time, whether there's something that would be directly applicable or just generally interesting to you because you like diversity and you want to know more in a lot of the other areas. We've also created a couple of free toolkits that are available. Diversitytoolkit.com is the website for that, and those are downloadable tools, guides to how to recruit at minority-serving institutions, free stuff you can pull out, PowerPoints and other things that you can pull out and send to people, a lot of stuff like that, and we add to it very frequently. So those are a couple of ways, but I think one of the things that we would say is a success is we sort of are, we have tried to be the place where three groups that don't usually interact with each other come together and think about really how to move the needle on diversity. And that's the utility commissioners, the utility companies and communications companies, and the diverse suppliers themselves, and diverse workers as well. Because one of the things that happens is advancing diversity in the utility industry happens in silos as well. You know, so supplier diversity doesn't always talk to workforce diversity. People in California don't necessarily learn what people in North Carolina are doing. Utility regulators don't know any of it a lot of times. And so we sort of see our job as thinking about what's happening now and making people aware of how to do best practices around a variety of aspects, including customer service and language access, but then also thinking about what's going to happen down the pike as the demographics change, et cetera. So that's sort of what we do.
Eric? Thank you, Lori.
I ended up going with a non-Tesla EV. And one of the selling points was the manufacturer that I purchased from offered 3 free years of charging at Electrify America stations. So I pull up the Electrify America app. I'm like, hey, look at that. Within 3 miles of my employer, there was a charging station. So I'm like, sold, signed up. I start going to this charging station, and half the time the chargers are broken, or they're full, or there's non-EVs parked where the chargers go. And I'm like, well, this isn't gonna work. Now what do I do? I'm fortunate enough that I was able to install a charger at my house, so now I can just charge overnight, but not everyone has that luxury, especially those who live in apartment complexes or multifamily situations. So I said, okay, where's the next charging station? So between here and Palm Springs, there's two level 3 charging stations, one in Redlands, one at Cabazon. So as we're trying to build out this infrastructure, I guess my question is, how do we incentivize more of these level 3 charge? Because level 2s are great, but you can't get much of a charge. Like if I go to ChargePoint here and I plug in for the 3 hours, I'll get maybe 15, 20% of a battery charge, which just isn't sustainable like you see with some of the Tesla ones. And I know Tesla's working to kind of convert theirs where they can do both Tesla and non-Tesla. But I guess my question is, how can we incentivize more level 3 chargers? Because there is a growing demand. You see it everywhere. The stations are full. So how do we accommodate that demand?
Go ahead.
Great question. And having been working in this area 30 years, I have a very long view. So when we started installing chargers in 1995, 25% of them failed out of the box. They never turned on when we put them in. So we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go, especially now that people are going to be relying on the chargers. There is a mandate coming down that requires that chargers have 97% uptime. So that is going to be a challenge. We work with a lot of groups in the industry, but they're going to meet it. They have to meet it. So hopefully, and there are other things happening like reservation systems, idling fees, so somebody doesn't plug in and hog the charger. In the old days, we used to have little paper clocks we would put on the dashboard and say, I'm going to be leaving at 2 o'clock. You can plug in, or you know, or whatever. But now we're going to have actual, you know, mechanisms for doing that. To answer your other question, that is absolutely what is happening. The NEVI portion of funding under the IIJA or BIL is basically to build the interstate highway system of charging, and it's going to have to be uniform. You have to put in 4 150 kW chargers at every location. That's why I was talking about the issue with power availability, and no level 2s, or they under that funding. You can put in level 2s with other funding. So NEVI is going to be transformational in terms of creating a reliable infrastructure. As I mentioned before, this area is an EV desert. When you look at it on the map, compared to all the clustered dots in LA County, there's nothing out here. We're going to change that. That's part of what Karen and I are working on. We're going to make a difference there. And how much is enough? I don't know. Because people's behavior changes as they get comfortable with the vehicles. So when I started driving electric in the dark ages, they got 20 miles, 50 miles, something like that. I was usually looking for a plug in the bushes somewhere. But you know, now that's, you know, they're much, when I have a car with 300 miles range, which my last 2 cars have had, I'm not that worried about it. I charged up before I came here. I'm going to tool around. I'm living, you know, near Pasadena. I'm going to tool around, go to Karen's Ventlet tonight, and drive home, and I'll never have to touch a charger. So things will, you know, it evolves, and the business case evolves. I can also tell you, as a business owner, you can't make money on level 2s. It's impossible, because one person plugs in for 8 hours. Even if you charge, I don't know, 30 cents a kilowatt hour, you're making pennies. So everybody wants to do the fast chargers. So I think you'll see it coming. Everybody is aware and concerned about the reliability issue and being forced to address it. Part of what the other grant that I received was to train veterans transitioning out of the military to be EV technicians. And we've been interviewing businesses, saying, what skills do you need? How do we train them? Would you hire this person? We're going to connect them with a federal program that would pay for a first year's wages. So we're doing a lot, but I agree with you. Big issue, we got to keep raising it. And we got to keep assuring people that it's being fixed, or they won't buy the cars. So
I'm going to just to add, Enid, is it true that one of the things I heard from the DOE a long time ago is that sorry, just because they're recording. Oh, got it. Because I think I've killed your mic there. Was that there was going to be a priority to the parts of California would be sort of unprioritized because we were already so far along. But it's the EV deserts that will be in California especially prioritized for this funding. Is that true?
You know, I hadn't heard that. It should be true, but I don't know actually if it is. But I did just see some very interesting, one of our colleagues just sent us an article from the Long Beach Press Telegram about an organization called Cultura, which has developed a free database that ties EV penetration percentage in a community to how many miles driven. And no surprise, the communities where the most miles are driven have the fewest EVs. So I don't think that's only about the range of the vehicles and concern about the range, because that shouldn't be an issue anymore. But I think it does say something about the socioeconomics and where, you know, charging companies need to make money. You know, so where are they going to put the chargers? Where they're going to be used today. A few companies, like the ones that I work with, put them where they're going to be used tomorrow and in 2 years, because they have investors, they have a long-term vision. That's what the utilities are doing too. But yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
So I'm going to answer Eric's question slightly different. A lot of times when these programs come from DOE, the state, or any of these other approved programs, there's a foresight to just get the dollars out there and construct those programs. There's no effort into the maintenance component of it and the forethought of whether they work or not. It really isn't. And so because of that, once they're installed, the contractor goes, okay, my part's done, and sometimes it's third-party contractors, not the company that's doing that work, so you can't hold them accountable. I mean, I could give you the whole gamut on solar and that particular area and how that's gone, but that's what you're dealing with now, is you're dealing with just the program got approved, the goal was to get it installed, and now you're dealing with, hey, some of these are not working. I mean, I've been to P.F. Chang in Chino Hills. I actually show you the picture. 15 vehicles and about half of them were filled with people. I'm like, that's not what I want to do, but you could see that there is a demand for that. And so, but they were all working because they were all plugged in, and they were all full. And so with that, we got time for one more quick question. I think Carla had a quick question out here.
Great information, very valuable. I'm also a minority women-owned company, and recently I became the liaison officer for a Dutch cluster of circular neighborhood companies from the Netherlands, and there's a delegation coming at the end of the month. And part of what we're working on is, and the question and invitation is to create a circular neighborhood lighthouse project, because energy is a big component on making cities more sustainable, but there's a lot more that it has to be integrated. And I heard about that holistic approach, and is to see if there's an interest to participate in creating this project, that it will be great also for students to learn, but also to see a example of how cities can work. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. So, okay, one more question. We're breaking.
Thank you. My name is Ron. I'm the Business Development Director of a medium-sized, minority-owned security company. And we, by the way, when Karen said, I'm happy to see that nice young man here, we were looking at her and said, what's it mean? But my question is for Enid. We have many patrol cars. Right now, they're all Priuses, okay? Are there any grant opportunities for minority-owned businesses that maybe want to convert to EVs, in the field?
Yes, absolutely. And there's, a lot of the funding is not specifically for minority-owned, but some of the grants that include the ability to get vehicles. We were just talking with MPHS about that, and they want to get a vehicle, and we were looking at a grant, and they said, oh, you can apply for a vehicle too. So there's also there happens to be a loophole in the federal incentive program, because one of the kind of unfortunate things that has happened, that in trying to get to Buy America, which I think is fantastic, right now we went from 70 qualified federally qualified vehicles to 10. Yeah. So, but commercial vehicles are exempt. So literally you could drive a truck through that loophole. So there's a $7,500 credit, then there's California credits, there's a program if it's, depending on if these are light duty vehicles, but for medium and heavy duty vehicles, there's something called HVIP. So yes, you just have to kind of put the pieces together, and we all become experts in what's called stackable incentives. You're allowed to take money from CARB and match it with money from the Energy Commission and match it with federal money, but you can't match 2 grants from the Energy Commission, that kind of stuff. So we all kind of know, I have a colleague who can do this like in her head and figure out, 10 seconds what you can qualify for. So yes, so we should talk about that.
Yeah,
and
maybe we can
absolutely.
exchange information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I really want to thank this panel. Please thank them for their contributions for today's panel. So, you will have time later on to interact with them. I call each one of these friends. So thank you very much for today's presentation.